So I wanted you to notice my little quilt. Pretend that it has a Minky back on it. And then I'm just going to jump in and talk to you literally about Minky. What batting to use. I use the wall hanging to have it hang better. So, like we said, think about the quilt and who's going to be using it. And then you can decide kind of what batting you want to use, or if you want to use the batting. Baby quilts, you want it to be soft and pliable. And you don't I want you to think about the shrinkage as well. Because if you have a piece top and you're washing it all the time, it may shrink a little more than the minky and the batting. So think about that. And then for larger quilts, if you don't want them as heavy, think about using flannel as your batting as well. That's one of those little resources that I learned when I first started quilting and hand quilting, that you could use flannel as the batting, and it really does help with the stitching, and it makes it soft and a little more pliable. So, and then for your minky, wash it on a gentle cycle with cold water if you have the backing, and dry at a low heat for about 10 minutes, and then hang it to dry. Those are suggestions from the Minky people themselves. So I'm going to jump in and you'll see my distorted face. So we're going to talk about batting.
To use a batting or not to use a batting, okay? Well, I'm going to use the batting on this. But with Minky, because it's so thick and it can become really stiff, you may not want to use one. Okay, it's your choice. Okay, if you want it more pliable, I wouldn't use anything. But an option that you can use is flannel. Let me come over here. Flannel, they used to use way back when, in the good old days, as a filler. In fact, my very first quilt that I ever hand pieced or quilted, I used a piece of flannel rather than batting because I didn't have anything else. And so it was making my stitches nice and even. So you can decide what you want. This will make it slightly stiffer. Then pick out your batting that you want to use and just enjoy the whole process.
All right, so I'm going to go to the next little screen where I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to attach the Minky to your frame. And so I came up with this. I think it's a great idea. I just used a strip, a 3-inch wide strip of fabric that I kind of used a larger size stitch. And then you can use your red snappers or whatever way you want it. And then you don't have to double pin. So let me talk to you about that.
We didn't sew the strip on this bottom part, just to show you how stretchy it is. And so when they say when you're using Minky, you want to put your pins one direction and then fill in the little spaces going the other direction. So that was a way of showing you how important it is. Just that little strip of fabric that you want to throw away after, just call it good. Okay?
Yeah, so sew a strip across it, and then you don't have to use as many pins, and it's going to pull and roll more evenly and straight, and it's not going to have the stretch. So I have the selvage on the sides, so it doesn't stretch on the sides as much. So the selvage edges are really important, and we'll get to some more tips using Minky later on. All right, so here's my next one.
Got my backing on, and I want you to see how evenly it will pull as I'm quilting. Okay, so I'm going to roll it so it's just right here on the edge. Sometimes we don't roll our quilts far enough to set our safe area. So I wanted to show you that. Roll your quilt to set your safe area. And now I'm going to put my top right down in this area right here because I want to leave some of this showing.
All right, I'm going to just keep on going to my videos.
So I want you to notice how much wider my Minky is than my top. That's so I can sew off the edges onto the batting. I've also made my batting wider and longer.
just so I can sew off the edges. Now, I want to make sure that I'm basting down the edges with the Minky. And you want to use a larger size stitch. Don't use your teeny tiny regular stitch. This is at 15. I'm going to move it down to like 5 or 6. And I'm just going to use regulated precise mode to pull up my thread, and I'm going to keep it right next to the edge as close as I can, because I don't want it folding over on me. So I'm just going to turn it on, and this is where I'm going to check my stitches. Okay, but I'm going to go slow, and the reason I'm going slow is because my machine's on slow, and I don't want to outrun my machine. It'll make my stitches bigger, and I really like the stitch length because I want you to notice how it's not puckering right here. It's just laying nice and flat, and that's what's going to give me that cohesive edge to edge without it folding over. All right, we're going to keep on going.
So as I'm basting, to get rid of my little wrinkles, I use my finger and my thumb to kind of stretch it across so that I can just move across and stay as close. And I'll move my hand again and just go as far as I can. Move my hand again, and I'll do this all the way down. And it really does help with your basting.
Especially when you get to your corners and stuff, you really want to pull it. And notice how I'm using the arm of the machine as it's stretched to kind of pull it down. So it really will help you lay it a lot flatter. Now, if you use a teeny tiny stitch, you guys, it tends to pucker and fold over. So make sure you're watching the stitch length and you'll have a better look. Okay. So tacking down the edges, I just want you to remember to use a longer stitch length. And especially with borders and everything, and if you're using a double layer of batting, it has a tendency to really kind of pucker right along this edge right here. And so you may get the fabric, if you haven't stretched it enough, folding over, so you get a little wrinkle right here on the edge. So watch that, move slow and stay close to the edge, because you don't want to come in a 1/4 of an inch and have, as your foot sews off, have it fold over on you. Just a horrible look, and you want to make sure that all of this is in the binding and hidden. And like I said, I use my fingers a lot. Okay, so now we're going to get into talking about setting our safe area. Okay, so I'm going to set my safe area, and I'm going to go into pantograph because I'm going to quilt an edge-to-edge design across my little quilt here. So I'm tapping on pantograph, and this is where it's going to ask you to set your safe area. Now, you guys, we oftentimes don't set our safe area wide enough and long enough, okay? Because you haven't rolled your leaders up far enough to cover the whole area. Okay, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to move my foot off the top quilt top. This is okay, because I'm never going to sew off the batting, but I'm going to move it off the quilt top. See how far I've moved it? And all the way to the top. Even though I'm in this area, I'm never going to sew up in there, but I'm just setting my safe area. So I'm going to tap on where it says top left. Okay, now I'm going to move across my quilt top again onto the batting. Okay, it's okay, because I'm not going to hit the bungees or anything, and I'm never going to sew off into this area right here. And I'm going to pull it forward as far as I can so that the back hits the take-up pole, and then tap on where it says bottom right. Okay, now we've given it enough width and height to cover our quilt. Now we're going to set in our parameters of our quilt. Okay, before we set our parameters, I'm going to show you how to import a design really quick. Okay, and I'm going to add it to my design on this tablet, design library on the tablet. And I wanted to show you how to import them in. And so I'm going to come up here, tap on the X. I'm going to, I'll move up here to the plugins. Their plugins are located at the top right of your tablet screen where it says plugins. Open it up and I want to do a batch import. Okay, so this is on a new drive. I just plugged it in. So I'm going to come over here on this little window right here. It says new drive, and I'm going to tap on my D drive. All right, my designs are located in the new folder. So I'm going to open up the new folder. Okay, this is so easy, you guys. I'm going to tap on multi, okay? Because I want to select all of them at the same time. And then tap on all. See how they're all selected? And then move over here to the bottom right where it says import. And now it's importing. It's as easy as that. Okay. Then tap on OK. And it asks me if I want to import any more. I'm just going to say no. And now it's going to close it up. Now I can go in and select my design. So I'm going to move over, select pattern right here. And then I'm going to come up here to my patterns file folder and then find my batch file. That's the one that houses or locates your new designs in the batch. Double tap to open. And now I can scroll down and find the design that I want. And it's over here called snowflakes. To my next one, okay? Okay, now we're going to apply the total width and height. I'm using Power Panto as my Panto mode, okay? That's this button right here. You can go in and select from Power Panto, Easy, Basic, or Advanced. I'm not going to use Advanced, so I've selected Power Panto. Now I'm going to apply my measurements. Okay, so the width of this quilt is 45 inches wide. I am going to add extra inches because I want it to sew off the edges. And know that you're always going to lose with fabric shrinkage as it's stitching. Come on, you guys. You have to calculate for the fabric shrinkage as you're moving down your quilt. Even if you're rolling it, it's going to roll unevenly. So instead of 45, I have 52 inches. I am going to make it 45, 46, 47. Let's make it 48. Okay. I'm going to make it 49. Okay. Because that gives me 2 inches on each side. And that should be enough. Okay. And the height of it is 57. Right. 47, you guys. So I'm going to make it, I'm not going to quilt past it, but I'm going to give it a lot. So I'm going to make it 56. Okay. That should give me enough to account for the fabric shrinkage. All right, so here we're going to import our design onto our window, and save our design. Now what we're going to do, now that we've sized and spaced our design, we're going to sew in zones because we want to sew in sections all the way down. And it's connecting, and it's going to ask me to save my design. And I'm going to absolutely save my design, okay? I'm going to say yes. And this is going to be, we're going to call it Quilters Playground Minky space. And I'm going to do M-I-N-K-Y. And then I'm going to hit enter and save. Okay, now my design is saved. Okay, see I have a jump from here to here. All right, so that one's done. Now I'm going to go to the next one. Now you'll see I have a big long jump, okay, that is going from the right-hand side to the left, and it's going to jump. So where I make some of these changes is in my zone manager. So I'm going to go into zone manager, and because I haven't placed my quilt, my design on my quilt, it's absolutely safe to go in and say yes. and it's going to open up your zone manager. And I'm going to sew out this zone 1, but I want to change the settings. So I want to change my start position to sew from the left. I want it to go back and forth, okay? So I'm going to have it alternate. Now, if your machine does better sewing from the left, that's okay. Have it always sew from the left. But this one should be okay sewing from left and then back to sewing from the left to the right and then sewing back from the right to the left. All right, then I'm going to change the sewing direction, okay? Rather than having a big long jump, I'm going to change it to continuous. So notice that has the little sewing edges right there. That will make it continuous. So we'll sew down off of it, add a stitching line, and have it sew continuously all the way down my quilt and say, okay. Now it's going to ask me if I want to save my changes. And yes, I'm going to save these changes so that if I come back in the next day, I don't have to go and rechange it. And we want it to sew consistently. So we're going to say yes. I'm going to find my Quilter's Playground right here. And then save it over on top. It ready exists. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to replace it. All right. All right, so next one is our first placement. So I want you to notice where I've made my first placements, okay? I've made them wide enough off the quilt that as I place my A, and it says we highly recommend that you mark to place your design. So notice how it came in slightly, and then I'm going to move all the way across and make my B, okay? B. Now C and D are moving in and out. So you don't really need to worry about C and D on your first one, but you might want to on your second and third rows. So anyway, I've placed it. Now I'm just going to come over here. It's going to start right up here. I can tap on toolbox, move to start point. See how it's moving up and off my quilt? I'm never going to sew off the batting. And I release the carriage. I'm going to, I don't want to use pull bobbin. I'm just going to use my single stitch and pull up my threads. And then I'm going to hold on to them as I start stitching. Okay. Going to make a tie-off stitch. After it makes the tie-off stitch, I can cut my threads and do its thing. Okay. All right, so this one, I'm just showing you that the Minky, okay, this is really important, you guys, because I didn't have a double layer of batting. I didn't have enough protection, was pulling up through. And so I stopped it really quick and I went and added another layer of batting so it wouldn't pull up through because I have a lot of white on it and a dark green Minky back and I didn't want it pulling up through. So I used a size 14 needle and a thread that worked with the size 14 needle to make a smaller hole. That was that one. And now we're running out of time. So this one, I wanted to show you how to mark the next zone when it comes to the end. Right, so I quilted my first zone, all right? It's very textury because I added a double layer of batting and I'm ready to mark my next zone. So you'll see, notice on the screen how it says, have you completed, cutting your threads and everything. You can get rid of these messages if you don't want to have them. So you can just tap on do not show again and you can decide to get rid of it permanently or just for this sewing session. I'm just going to say yes. And now it's going to move to where I'm going to mark my next section. Notice I haven't rolled my quilt yet, okay? I'm going to insert my needle and just do my single stitch right here on the screen. It says single stitch. So it went in And as it's moving and as it pulls the thread out, I am going to mark. Now I'm going to say next mark, and it's going to move across. So notice where the thread's coming out, right there. That's where I'm marking. And I didn't mark on my thread, but I marked on my batting because I can't, because I'm going to cut that off. I didn't want it to drag my marker across my white. So it's coming over here. I'm going to tap on my single stitch one more time. Okay, so it's inserted the thread. So look, it says done, and I can tap on continue. And it's going to say, have you made sure that all your markers, if you had a hoop frame, you would probably have several more to mark. So make sure that you're marking all of your little marks because they'll help you line up your next zone. And I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to say okay because it's telling me the machine's going to move to where I'm going to roll. I'm just going to wait till the thread comes out right there and mark. All right. So now it's pulled it back, and it should pull it back pretty close because I've had some fabric shrinkage to where you originally placed your first mark. I could say, okay, okay. And now I can unclamp my quilt and roll it till this mark right here is underneath the foot. Now this is an approximation, okay? It's not, doesn't have to be exact. So I'm going to roll it, and I'll show you what it looks like, and then we're going to tack down our edges. All right, so we're going to roll our quilt. So I'm rolling my quilt up right now to where, but notice how my machine is clear back where it's hitting the pole. So I'm just going to roll it up slightly, and then I'm going to roll it this way. And I might have to readjust. Let's just make sure it's all nice and smooth, and then I can hit and see as it's moving back because it's going to quilt in this area. Okay, so that seems to be really good. And see how and then when I mark, I'll be okay. So I'm just going to smooth it out, and then I'm going to tack down my edges. I'm going to change my stitch length. I'm going to release my sewing machine, okay. I'm not going to use a basting stitch. I'm just going to release my machine because I haven't placed my design. So I'm going to go into my toolbox right here and release my sewing machine. Okay, now it says I have manual control. Notice that my screen on my machine changed. It changed, so now I can use the settings. I can change this to be 5 or 4. I'll do it 5. And now I can bring up my thread and tack down my sides. All right, so now we're gonna place our design. So now I can release my sewing machine, and I'm going to tap on OK. You'll see the screen change, and it says it's back into quilt motion mode. Now, if it doesn't change, just go back in and try it again, okay? So now you'll notice that my A position is on this side now. So it's the one I'm going to place first. I'm going to move my needle so it's over my mark. Tap on A. See how my design shifts and moves? It moves away from this left corner, and that way I know that this is placed. Now my B is how I'm angling that up and down. So it will be, see how it moved up slightly, all right? When I placed my B, I'll show you. It just moved up slightly, so it's kind of angled up on this side. Okay, that's fine, because that's how I want it to quilt. How my quilt is angled, I want my design to make sure that it's angling that direction. Now, let me show you what C and D do. Okay, C and D actually pull the design in or out, okay? And I'm not going to pull it in. I'm just going to pull it back this direction. See how it pulls it in on the side? Notice it's going to get in the way of my bungee. So hopefully it'll just sew up here and it won't get in the way. But if I notice that it is, what I'm going to do is pull my bungee down here, make sure that it's out of the way. All right. All right, so the next one, I'm going to start quilting the next zone. So really quick. I'm going to start over here. I'm going to tap on my my toolbox, move to start point, pull up my threads, and quilt another zone. And you'll do the same process all the way down. All right, so we'll just pull up our threads and tap on and tap on sew. I'll just hang on to these while it ties off the stitch. All right, you guys, we're almost done. Okay, so this is the quilt quilted, and this is the back of it. So I went and I got, and I'll explain it to you. So you can see my sewing line as it's going all the way down. This is where I tacked it, and this is where I'm going to be cutting. So I got my 3-inch wide painter's tape. I'm going to tape it down, all the way down, so that when I cut it, I turn it over and cut it. Guess what? This is going to pull up all those little minky fibers on my quilt. Let me show how great this is. So I will cut this one side, pull it down, and turn it over, and then we'll be cutting with my scissors. You can use your rotary cutter. You don't have to use the scissors. They're just what I had. Cut on here. And these were great scissors, you guys. Sharp and pointy. Okay, I'm going to finish this up real quick. All right, I'm going to cut this off and show you how great this works. All right, so now as I take this off, I'm just going to pull it, see how it pulls all that minky off. Cool. Now I'm not going to have all these little fibers all over my house. Yep, because they're stuck to the painter's tape. Okay, so last but not least, okay, and I just put Minky isn't stinky when you know how to use it correctly. If you don't and you don't use it right, it can be frustrating. So remember, the batting that's recommended is just make sure it doesn't pull through. I would do a little test piece before you start quilting on your quilt so that you know that it works. And I know a lot of people have a lot of suggestions on what they have used and had good results. Use a cotton poly blend or a cotton or a wool is what they suggest. And then think about the shrinkage of the top because you want it to shrink at the same rate. So try to minimize the shrinkage. And with the cuddle minky fibers that poke through, try to make it so you're using the same color minky that's mostly the same color as your top. I used a dark green and I probably wouldn't have if I had a white. Okay, I should have used a white so it didn't poke through in a few places. Choose a backing that matches, so your top. And then to avoid having a piece one, use an extra wide minky. That will really help when it comes to the stretch and the pull on it. But if you have to, make sure that the seams of the piece backing run horizontally. That's what they suggest. Make sure your selvages are the direction that you want them to be to give you less stretch. And then use the piece, a wide piece, to piece it to it as you're pinning it on. It will make a huge difference. And then last but not least, thanks for joining us here at Quilter's Playground. And I hope you learned a lot today because I really want to make these informative and I really want to help you guys move forward. And by helping you, it helps us understand what you guys need. So please share with us what you need help with, and we'll be sure to address all of those little things. All right, I am done, Camille, so you can take over.
Um, Jana said, I've always used 1 point placement marking in the center. Does using 4 point placement distort the design? How do you know where to mark C and D?
Oh, okay. So 4 point actually is a better way to quilt it out. 1 point, okay, think of it, the design. With 1 point placement, and if you can watch my hands, okay, you have 1 point. Think of my head as that center point, and my arms are lengthened out, they're the design. So as you're placing it and rolling it, notice if you notice that you have a hard time because you have to space it out further because one side's rolling up tighter than the other, so it has more of a tilt or slant. That's where 4 point placement comes in. It's much better because you can place the A and then the B angles it. Okay, the C and D just pull it out and in. So if you mark it correctly, you can use those marks all the way down, and you won't have to fight the tilt of it and space it out even wider so it's not the design with 1 point placements rolling on top or sewing on top of the other one because the gap is coming closer together because you didn't give it a wide enough margin. So I think 1 point placement is harder to use. I like 4 point. And that's exclusively what I use. Now, I used to use 1 point all the time because it was just one placement. But as we've grown to understand quilting a little bit better, 4 point actually will give you a better result all the way down your quilt. So try it out and see what you think.
What are your recommended settings for like the foot level and your tension and those kinds of things when you're doing Minky?
Well, if you're using a double layer, make sure you're using 2 of your foot height gauges to bring it up just slightly more. You don't want to bring it up too high because you want to make sure that your needle can go down and catch your bobbin thread. So I would use 2 foot height gauges and make it a little taller, just a little bit.
And you do that before you put any fabric on,
Yes,
just
you
with
have to
the
do it
empty
off
machine.
the fabric.
And then you can definitely quilt out Minky on a QMX with a little rebel, right?
Yeah. However, if you're using the sensors, they won't sense the Minky. So you'll have to put it so the Minky is up on top rather than on the bottom because the sensors like it. Now, if you're automation, it should be fine.
Yeah, where
Yep.
QMX is the automation that moves it. It would be fine with automation. Just the sensor on the little rebel struggles a little bit with
So if you're
um
it,
reading through the Minky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just kind of depends on the lighting, the thickness, and that kind of stuff. Cool.
It actually stitches on the QMX. The Rebel stitches really nice without using the sensor.
yep,
It
it's awesome,
stitches.
you guys, for quilt.
Yeah. If you're
So if
using the
that's all you
sensor,
can afford,
yeah.
think about it.
Yep.
Okay, this question was, I want to use my backing to bring forward for a Minky binding. Is there any reason it has to be sewn off the side? So they want to wrap the back of their Minky around to the front. I'm actually unpicking some right now because I realized I sewed off the side and I didn't want to do that because I want to use the backing as
Sure.
the binding.
I kind of like the designs. Yes, there's a reason why you want to sew off because you don't want that stitching line to come in and be not underneath your binding. So if you're folding it over, I think it's kind of cool looking. I've seen some of the Minkies where they have the stitch design and they've actually folded it over and used as part of the binding. So you can decide whether or not that's how you want it to be. It's just controlling that stitching line down the quilt. I think it'll be a little difficult to hide.
We will post this on YouTube. It normally takes a couple days for us to get it on there, and then I do send a link out to you guys via email with Carla's slideshow and the video from today. So you guys can go back, review the information, check out YouTube, leave comments, likes, share, help us get out there, subscribe to the channel. There's all sorts of good stuff on there. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, we have a whole series we did on just QMX. So there's 4 videos in there right now for just quilt motion automation. And it is there to help because let me tell you, it was really in depth and really great to watch.